First, there was the void. Then there was a headache. And a flower of hope that would give birth to a sanctuary. With his hand in hand, he who bore the pain would try to reach the void again. The place where nothing moves, where darkness is Lord, and silence its preacher, a place of peace. There, his head can pour freely onto a new seed which, for new purpose, sprout life. But alas, ceaseless violence and unapologetic noise would again be wallpapered to the corridors of past serenity. A time known as post-void, a place known as Post-Void is an indie first-person shooter which in the 5 years since its release has cemented itself as both one of my personal favorite and most memorable offerings from the indie scene, which primarily stems from its less is more approach to game design, which is seen throughout all the aspects of the game, whether it be in its limited yet meaningful weapon roster, basically non-existent though still ambiguous approach to conveying its message, or its soundtrack which consists of a singular track, all of which is complemented by the game's retro visual style and aesthetic, which makes use of psychedelic color palettes that contribute to the game's atmosphere that is dead set on pushing the player to their limit through essentially sensory overload. There isn't a single breath wasted on this game, and it's all very concise and uncompromising on what it wants to be. Although I will say that for the purposes of this video I did go into the accessibility settings and disabled most of the flashing imagery, since I'm really not trying to give anyone a fucking seizure. Anyway, with all that said, let's get into it. At its core, Post-Void is about killing and moving quickly. Movement in this game is incredibly fun. Sliding around like a tweaker coked out of his mind in a CVS parking lot really adds a lot to the game. Failing to do so will just simply result in your death, due to the core mechanic of the game revolving around the item called the idol, the head-shaped thing your character carries throughout the entirety of the game, which essentially serves as your health bar, with the added caveat that the idol is continuously leaking, causing your health to constantly be depleting, with the only way to replenish it by killing enemies and making it to the end of each level. This in itself rewards aggression and speed from the player, while punishing any and all hesitation. The only bit of downtime you get is in between levels found in the bodies of water, where you'll be given a choice either between a new weapon to use, or other gameplay modifiers that ensure that no two runs will ever play identically the same. These can range anywhere from the idol simply being able to hold more liquid, effectively giving you more health, making enemies' projectiles move slower so you can dodge them more effectively, or something a little more experimental like moving faster while walking backwards. All of this further plays into the game's roguelike elements, as well as boosting the game's replay value, making it simultaneously easy to get into, while hard to master with a high skill ceiling. Like I mentioned at the start of this video, this game has a limited weapon roster, but thanks to this game's overall less is more approach, this is not necessarily a negative as it allows the game to focus on each individual weapon, making them all distinct and viable throughout the game. The starting pistol, while not the most powerful, has a fast fire rate and pinpoint accuracy, making headshots feel extremely satisfying. The SMG on the other hand, while encouraging a spray and pray approach, it also has a significant bullet spread, making it ineffective at mid to long ranges, and if you're missing your shots then that means you're wasting time, which in a game with a continuously depleting health pool is not a good thing, since again killing enemies is your only source of time and health. Then there's the shotgun, which has a wide spread and high damage, which works great for crowd control. However, with its slower firing and reload speed, if you're literally seconds away from dying and don't make your shots count, you will die. Lastly, you have the knife, which is probably the hardest weapon to use in a game if you don't know what you're doing. It encourages very aggressive play and being able to maintain close range under pressure. Again, like I said earlier, Post-Void is easy to get into but hard to master, and the game's weapons further play into that. Now taking a moment to talk about the game's level design. The game is split into 3 separate acts, which make up a total of 11 separate levels, all of which are procedurally generated, which like the gameplay modifiers ensures that no 2 runs will ever be the same. You'll spend the game traversing through tight hallways and making sudden turns. At the start of the game, the levels are more simplistic and straightforward. However, as you progress, they progressively get more abstract and disorienting in a way, making you feel like you're at a maze at times. This both makes the game more difficult and reinforces the game's core gameplay loop of keep moving or you will fucking die. Now as for the enemies in the game itself, they all come with a unique movement and behavior pattern. Some will just directly run at you trying to swarm you, and others will just try to pick you off from the distance. And then these little fucking drones are specifically created to give you sensory overload. Now it should be noted that despite the game's less is more approach. All of the enemy designs are extremely unique, with distinct enough silhouettes that makes them recognizable at a distance. Now, like I said earlier, the only way to keep your health up is by killing enemies, making them directly tied to the timer mechanic, which further plays into the core gameplay loop of keep moving or die. You know, when you really break it down, all of this is not really that revolutionary, but the game's seamlessly interwoven simplicity benefits it greatly. The last aspect of this game I want to look into is its narrative and message. Now, seeing how the game doesn't have much in the way of a story aside from its opening cutscene, that leads me to believe that the game's message is directly reflected in the game's gameplay itself. You see, the game's signature mechanic of constant movement or death, to me serves as a poignant metaphor of addiction and escapism. The idle, constantly draining in a way mirrors dopamine cycles, where the only way to keep going is chasing stimulation, which in a case of Post-Void is by killing enemies or progressing through the levels. Stillness is punished. The only way to attain a sense of safety is through pushing forward. Aside from the game's mechanics, its visuals clearly play into the message as well. The sense of sensory overload through the game's color palettes, clashing colors, distorted audio, in a way mimics a bad drug trip, or even dopamine exhaustion. Simply playing the game and surviving through violence could be a reflection of addictive cycles, followed by a deeper dependency. I feel as if the game's setting is equally as important, and I don't think it's a coincidence that the game's levels resemble office hallways. In a way, it's a critique of the modern workplace. The maze-like hallways in the game, with sudden and jarring turns, can be interpreted as trying to portray the sense of feeling trapped in a corporate hierarchy, especially with the game's enemies resembling office workers turned into monsters, almost as if they've been dehumanized and drained by the monotonous mundanity of the corporate world, and the game's core gameplay loop could be a potential allegory of escapism from it all. In the end, you don't win Post-Void, you don't beat the game. You just last longer. Death is inevitable, delayed, not avoided. There's only more chaos, until you fail, only for you to do it all again, where ceaseless violence and unapologetic noise will again be wallpapered to the corridors of past serenity. In a time known as Post-Void, in a place known as Post-Void.